I am just here with your 2008 Polaris Sportsman 500 fuel-injected bike, and I'm just going to go over the check-over items that I've done on the bike because you want it checked over, and then we'll touch into the cooling system issues with your fan switch and hot light and all that sort of thing. Anyway, so let's start at the back and we'll just work our way right to the front of the bike. It's probably the simplest way to do it. I have a checklist that you can see over there that I go through, and anything that is good, I'm not going to talk about it. Everything that's not good, we're going to address, and then you can decide what repairs you'd like to have done. So, if we start here in the back, bushings and sleeves for the bearing carriers. They need to be replaced on both sides, and you can see a little bit of that when I move that rear wheel. That moves side to side. Some of that, you can actually see it in there. That's the bearing carrier bushings and sleeves. The bushings and the sleeves on your A-arm, the frame mounts, they seem to be okay. These ones here aren't actually OEM. Somebody's already replaced those. And the lower ones look like they're not. They are OEM possibly, or a black aftermarket. It's one or the other. Just the colors. As long as this is kept greased up, they don't seem like they have a lot of play. You can probably go a while longer without too many issues on those. But those outer ones should be changed. The other thing you have going on in the back is you have play in the wheel bearings on both sides. So those also should be replaced. Let's see, since we're just talking about driving the back in, I think I'd mentioned to you about when you were here that you needed a front prop shaft U-joint, and a lot of times they go as a set, and I'll show you the rear one, and you actually see that your rear yoke is flopping around a lot on the snorkel shaft, or the output shaft for the transmission. It's called a snorkel shaft on Polaris. And if we go in here, we'll actually see that the issue is a little bit more severe than that, because the snorkel shaft's actually turning inside the yoke where they're supposed to be splined together. The splines are wore out in the yoke, at least. So what I would have to do there to be able to tell you if you only need a prop shaft, because at this point you need a prop shaft, I would have to pull the front differential ahead a little bit, unbolt it, pull the spring pin out of the rear shaft on the input shaft on your front differential, pull the prop shaft off it, slide the prop shaft out, and have a look at those splines and see if they're actually still in decent condition that they can be used, or if this bike's been run so long that they're wore out as well and you need a transmission rebuild, because that basically requires you remove the transmission from the bike and to remove that snorkel shaft to replace it. Next, so if we go over here on this side, I think that, oh yes, rear brake pads. I'll show you a little bit more what the condition of them is when I get to the front of the bike, but your rear brake pads are wore out. Your master cylinder needs to be replaced. You can actually see the wet on the body where it's up in here where it's leaked in the past. And that's why that pedal doesn't do anything, because there's no pressure in the system, because more than likely the system has nothing in it anymore. It probably hasn't for a while. We would replace the cylinder, flush out any fluid that's left in it in the system, and refill it. Put new pads on the back because the pads are wore out. And then we would bleed it, and then make sure that we don't have any leaks at any of the other any steel fittings or lines, or at the caliper itself in the back, or anything like that. Going towards the front of the bike, I checked your air filter. I'm going to recommend that be replaced. That's served its time. The sock that covers it, so that's this guy here. I can clean that, but the filter itself should be cleaned, and I'll wipe out the air box as well for you. Up on the front, you need, so you can go by the torn boots, that pretty well tells the story. You need inner and outer tie rod ends, and you can see the amount of movement there is in those. It's like almost like a ball and socket type joint. So that's the same on both sides, and it's the same. There's wear in the outer joints as well. Not as bad as those, but you can get those in kits, and you'd replace them all, 4 of them all at the same time. Let's see. Also on the front, so I checked your suspension bushings here on your A-arms. They seem like they're in decent shape, but your ball joints, see if I can show you this with my pry bar, sometimes I can. If you, right now the suspension is hanging by the top of the shock, and there's no weight on your lower A-arm from the strut. So usually I should be able to, I pick up, try and pry in this position between the wheel and the bottom of the A-arm. I shouldn't see any movement because the ball and socket is in good shape. In yours, it's not the case. It actually goes up and it sticks there a little bit. But you have play in your lower ball joints, and that's on both sides. So that's the same either side. Let's see. You also have play in your front wheel bearings are wore out, and you can see the movement between the CV joint and the strut, and that's because of the end of the axle shaft that bolts onto the wheel hub is moving inside because the bearings wore out. So you need new wheel bearings, and that's, once again, that's the same on both sides of the bike. Brake pads on the front are wore down to the metal backers. So there is no pad left, and you can actually see this inside pad where the disc has started to wear a groove into the metal backer. So there's like a shoulder on the top that really shouldn't be there. So you need new pads. I would also recommend changing the brake fluid, just because of the issue you already have at the back end. You don't want to have the same thing happen in the front. We'd flush out all the brake fluid, and I can pop these caliper pins out and make sure they're in good shape, and clean them all up and stuff for you as well, so the calipers slide in and out on the pins the way they're supposed to. All your lights work, and your display works. Brake light works off of your handbrake. I did notice on your handbrake up here on the top that if you were under hard braking, that whatever this was, I'm assuming it must have been for some kind of a mount for a windshield or something like that. Anyway, it interferes with the brake lever. So either point it down, point it up, take it off. Whichever way works for you. If you're not using it, I would get rid of it. Let's see. Shift arm for your shifter. So this is your shifter, and there's a rod that goes all the way along here, and it comes out this end. That's the other end of it. You can see when I move this, the lever moves. This is called a bushing. It just snaps. It's like a little ball. Once again, we're almost like a ball and socket kind of thing. It's a plastic bushing. This is called a bell crank lever. It's made out of aluminum. And what happens is these wear out over time. You can see one tooth already where it snaps in is starting to wear away. And I know if I push hard enough right now that I can pretty easily pop that out. So what happens is it'll wear out eventually, and it'll fall out. And you won't be able to shift the bike unless you go back here and try and tie it on with baling wire or something like that. So for this, you replace the bell crank lever and you replace the socket, and sometimes there's a similar socket on the front. Sometimes you have to replace that one as well. So I can pull that side cover off, and we'll see if we need to replace that one as well. Now, for your cooling fan. So basically this has had some type of a error or a fault with the wiring or a sensor or something in the cooling system, and somebody put a bypass switch in, so the fan would run all the time. So where this switch has been removed, is they probably cut a wire for it or something, or there is a broken wire for it now, not sure which. Basically, that's the same as unplugging it. So when the system sees that it is unplugged, the hot light comes on. And if it was under normal conditions, the hot light would come on, and I do believe the fan would run all the time. So either way, you have a problem with your, I checked your sensor, and there's a resistance measurement you can do for it, and yours is outside the spec. So first thing I would recommend is replace the coolant temperature sensor. If you want it back to normal, you'll have to start there. The next thing is we would put the wiring back the way it was. So whatever wires have been cut off, I'll have to figure that out and wire it back in. And then then we'll test it and see if it works the way it's supposed to. If it doesn't, then we'll have to go in and figure out what other issue there was originally. So that could be, normally with a Polaris, it's a wiring problem somewhere in the harness. There's a wire chafed, or a cooling temperature sensor is bad. Occasionally you'll find out that the problem is actually in the ECU itself, and you'd have to replace the ECU, but more times than not, it's wiring or the sensor. Anyway, so if that's something you want me to continue with, then I can do that as well. How long it would take? It doesn't take a long time to change the sensor, but we will have to drain your cooling system down to be able to pop it out of the cylinder head, because it is in the coolant jacket. And then I'll have to fill the coolant back up and bleed the system. So just so you know that part. And then, so we're looking at like an hour or something like that to change that sensor. Anyway, oh, one other thing. Two other things. Transmission fluid. Part of my service that I do is I check your transmission fluid, because these don't have to be changed as often as your front differential does. This one's contaminated with water, so or it's hot and cold storage will do this. This hasn't been changed in a long time. It should be a nice purple translucent fluid. This one's more like a purple mud. So anyway, that needs to be replaced as well. Your front differential fluid, I didn't notice any leaks, any seals or anything. Usually you'd see with seal leaks on these, you'd see staining on the aluminum body of the gear case housing, but I don't see anything. But I will pull that plug out. If I see if there's any, if I notice any horrible problems, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I just change the fluid out. I have demand drive here for them, and I change them out. And you just pay for the per milliliter. You don't have to buy a $20-some container that you won't use. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll answer them as best as I can. Have a great day.